What's going on, guys? Welcome to another Doctor Who Classic Review. Today I'm going to be reviewing the 4th Doctor Tom Baker story, The Deadly Assassin. This is a story from Season 14, which is Tom Baker's 3rd season as the 4th Doctor, and is a relatively well-known and highly appreciated one. It's the only story, I believe, in the classic series that doesn't feature a companion at all. The Doctor had just left Sarah Jane behind, and the next episode after this, the next story, would be The Face of Evil, where Leela would make her debut as the next companion. In this story, the Doctor does not have a companion at all, so yeah, very rare thing. We've seen it a little bit in the new series, but I think this was definitely the first and probably the only time in the classic series, I think, that this ever happened. So yeah, definitely an interesting thing, a little bit different. So anyway, this is The Deadly Assassin by Robert Holmes. Gallifrey, planet of the Time Lords. The Doctor has finally come home, but not by choice. Summoned by a vision from the Matrix, he is drawn into a web of political intrigue and assassination. Nothing is quite what it seems, and in the shadows lurks his oldest and deadliest enemy. Very, very short little thing on the back of the synopsis on the back of the DVD there, but it pretty much, it doesn't want to give too much away, and that is good. So yeah, this was an episode that I have seen before a couple of times, but I've not seen it for probably at least like 5 years. So it was relatively new for me, I suppose. I definitely had an idea of things that were going on already, but yeah, because I've not seen it in 5 or so years, it's relatively new, so it's, kind of fresh into my brain now. Anyway, let's get started with the cast. So Tom Baker as the 4th Doctor is really good in this one. I think he portrays the character brilliantly in this. It's interesting seeing him without a companion. Of course, up until this point, we've only really seen Tom Baker's Doctor with Sarah Jane. That's been his only main companion. I mean, we've had the Brigadier now and again. We've also had Harry as well in season 12. But we've seen him with Sarah Jane since he regenerated. So having him on his own here is definitely interesting. But yeah, he's great. He has some funny moments, some silly moments. Most of the time though, he's a bit more serious in this one. Because of the threat of the situation, the fact that he's going back to Gallifrey, he's back on Gallifrey, which I don't think he really wants to be. Yeah, he's got a lot going on here, and after just leaving his companion, who he's been with for quite a long time, yeah, I imagine it's hard for him, but he's going through and he's pushing through, and yeah, generally Tom Baker's performance is really good. Of course, there are no companions in the story, so there's no other characters to talk about. The only one I will mention is Peter Pratt as the Master. Of course, this is the Master's first appearance since Frontier in Space, when we saw Roger Delgado's Master. He, up until this point, was the only actor to play the Master. That was the only Master. And this version of the Master, played by Peter Pratt, I believe is the same version as Roger Delgado's, but he's run out of his regenerations. He doesn't have any more regenerations to go, but like the Master is, he's still fighting to stay alive somehow. So he's just this decrepit, decaying body, which is pretty creepy, but doesn't look great, thanks to not very good prosthetics and stuff. I wouldn't even call them prosthetics, it's just like a mask, I think. But yeah, I think Peter Pratt does a really good job, apart from, his voice not coming out great because his mouth is completely behind a mask. He doesn't even have, a mouth hole to talk through. It's completely behind there, so it sounds very muffled and not so great in at times. Apart from that though, the actual performance I think is really good. He's really menacing. He actually sounds a bit like Roger Delgado's Master in some scenes and stuff. So yeah, I really like him. I think he does a good job. Sadly, the mask though does, set it back a little bit, but that's definitely not a performance thing. That's just what he kind of had to work with. Alright, so let's get on to the good and the bad, starting off with the good. This is the first time seeing Gallifrey. The first time we ever see Gallifrey. We've heard it mentioned. The first time it was mentioned was in The Time Warrior with John Pertwee's Doctor, his final season, but we haven't actually seen Gallifrey up until this point. We have seen the Time Lords here and there. We saw the meddling monk in the Time Meddler. We saw a few Time Lords at the end of the War Games, and we might have seen some elsewhere. I mean, Omega was a Time Lord in the 3 Doctors, so we've seen them, but this is the first time we probably get to see them. We get to see the High Council, the first time we probably get to see the whole, their uniform with their giant neck pieces and head pieces and stuff, and massive robes, which look a bit ridiculous, but also they just look, Time Lords fits it perfectly. I think It's also, of course, the first time we're on Gallifrey, so it's a big story in Doctor Who, that's for sure. The Master's return, obviously we've just talked about this before, but yeah, this is the Master's return. I haven't seen him since season 10 in Frontier in Space, so it's awesome to see him back. Yeah, not played by the same actor, of course, because Roger Delgado had sadly passed away, but yeah, I think it's really good to have him back, and generally I think he's pretty good in this story. He has a nice part in the story. The Doctor doesn't really meet him until the end, but he knows he knows he's around fairly early on, about halfway through the story, I'd say. But yeah, when he does finally meet the Doctor, that confrontation is really good, which we'll get onto later. But yeah, generally, I'm happy that the Master came into this one. The Doctor wearing the Time Lord kind of High Council clothes, I thought was really cool. Just suits Tom Baker a lot because it looks, just that kind of clothing, it looks pretty ridiculous. They're massive. They're just massive robes, massive kind of collar things, the silly hats and that. They look pretty ridiculous. And Tom Baker pulls that off because, you know, we're used to him in a big hat, a massive scarf, and a giant coat. So, yeah, generally he just looks the part. He doesn't actually stay in those clothes for that long, but he looks the part when he is in them. And yeah, really, really good stuff there. The questioning people on what happened reminds me of the Unicorn and the Wasp. So there's a moment where the Doctor and kind of, I can't remember his name now, but the main guy who's kind of talking with the Doctor, and I can't remember his name, but they are talking with people to find out what happened. We know the president's just been assassinated, and they're trying to figure out what's happened. So they're asking people, where were you at this time? What were you doing? Have you got any information on what other people were doing and what was happening here and here? And it feels so much like the Unicorn and the Wasp. You know, that scene where the Doctor, Donna, and Chris, what's her name? Oh god, I've forgotten her name. Agatha Christie. I was like, Agatha Christie is, you know, confronting all those people and asking them what they were doing. It reminded me a lot of that scene, and I really liked it. It was kind of shot in a similar way. It was, you know, how it kind of faded out of one person and faded into the next person. Just a nice little scene that I don't know, I thought I'd write it down because it wasn't that substantial, I suppose, but I wrote it down because it did remind me of that other episode from the new series. The Master miniaturizing people, he miniaturized the cameraman, and he also miniaturized one of the guards. Awesome to see the Master miniaturizing stuff. It's just really cool to see. I mean, when they brought it back in Spyfall, in Series 12, the newest series, I thought it was really cool. And yeah, it was a very Master thing. He does it quite a lot, and I think it's just such a creepy and crazy way, and it actually looks decent as well, you know. I mean, it doesn't look terrible for the time. It looks fairly kind of believable and cool, and yeah, just the whole miniaturizing thing, it's just something that maybe has been overused here and there in the classic series, really, because it's only just appeared in the new series. But yeah, it's just something that you kind of, you know, you couple with the Master, so I liked seeing that. The Doctor going into the Matrix, I thought was pretty cool. So we've heard about this whole Matrix thing, and that's kind of how the Doctor saw, you know, this assassination before he went to Gallifrey. It got put into his mind, and he kind of foresaw it. And then he goes into the Matrix to try and figure out more what's going on, and he finds, I can't remember his name now. Actually, I've got it written down here. Goth. He finds Goth in there, who was one of the other people from the High Council, but he's kind of now working with the Master. Didn't really 100% get told whether or not he was working with him or whether he was hypnotized. I think he was actually just working with him. He wasn't really hypnotized by the Master. But yeah, he finds him in there and has a big fight with him. And that brings me on to my next point, the Doctor and Goth fighting in the water. I thought it was a cool scene. I really like fight scenes in Doctor Who. I think they're just really cool, especially with some of the older Doctors as well. Having it in the water as well, I thought was interesting. You know, how they're splashing around all over the place, and then the cliffhanger to, I believe, part 3 is Goth with the Doctor, his head under the water, and he's trying to drown him, and that's the cliffhanger. Or maybe that's not the cliffhanger. Was it? One of the cliffhangers was on the train track. One of the cliffhangers, I believe, was that drowning thing. I can't remember which was which. I think the train track was part 2, the drowning was part 3, maybe? I think. Yeah, so I like that scene. I like that whole thing. The whole thing with Goth kind of felt like, yeah, I mean, it felt a little bit kind of out there, but at the same time, I could kind of believe it, because at the start of the story, we got things of him, you know, believing he was going to be the next president. So yeah, it's kind of understandable that he would go down this path to make sure he would be the president of Gallifrey. And then finally for the good, the Doctor and the Master's final battle I thought was really good, really well shot. There's the whole thing with the Eye of Harmony, and you know, the Master activating that and basically destroying Gallifrey, but the Doctor manages to fight him off and yeah, save the day and save Gallifrey, which is always awesome. How the Master survives, it's one of those things. I mean, it's the Master, he just always survives, but he falls down that hole and then just kind of appears at the end of the episode, walks into his TARDIS and flies off. But I mean, that's just the thing with the Master, he just kind of survives, doesn't he? But yeah, generally that final sequence with the Doctor and the Master fighting each other, it's just a really cool sequence. So on to the bad, there are a couple of things to talk about. The Master's face masks looks pretty bad, like I said before. They had this same Master, you know, this decaying Master come back in The Keeper of Traken in season 18. When they brought him back, they actually did like makeup and stuff, and his eyes moved and his mouth moved, and it looked so much better. In this one, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's creepy, but it's not really creepy in a good way. It's creepy because his eyes don't move at all. They're big bug eyes and they don't move, and his mouth doesn't move at all. I think I could almost excuse the eyes, but the mouth not moving, yeah, it's really off-putting, and especially when, you know, the actor's voice is also, you know, let down because of that, talking through the mask. Yeah, it doesn't look great, it doesn't sound great, but generally the rest of the Master's costume, really raggedy, completely like burnt up, destroyed clothing, kind of robe and hood. Yeah, I did like that, just the mask thing was a little bit crap, and you know, kind of the hands as well weren't the best looking. And then finally, the only other bad thing I have to say is that the Matrix scenes for me, I felt got a little bit boring. The Doctor goes into the Matrix in, I believe, episode 2, and he doesn't come out, if I'm thinking of it correctly, he doesn't come out until like early episode 4, so there's like a whole episode and a bit where he's in the Matrix. Some of those scenes in the Matrix are fun, but some of them just drag on a bit. He doesn't say a whole lot, it's just him and who we eventually find out to be Goth, just running around, finding each other, playing catch up with each other, and honestly, at times it does get a little bit stale. Alright, so a rating for The Deadly Assassin, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Because I think there's a lot of really good stuff here. It's generally a fairly fun episode, apart from some of the things in the Matrix being fairly boring, and the Master's mask just not looking too great, the Master in general not looking too great. Performances are all very, very good. Tom Baker's especially is great, and same with Peter Pratt, both really, really good performances. And generally the story is interesting. I really like how we finally get to see Gallifrey for the first time. We get to see the High Council and all these Time Lords. It's just a really awesome setting, just a really awesome concept, let down by, yeah, some maybe not so great, some budget issues, I suppose, and also just a bit of padding in the Matrix scene. But yeah, a 9 out of 10 is what I'm going to give it. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe. Go down in the description, follow me on Twitter, that would be awesome, and I'll see you guys in the next video.